Good evening, everyone. Glad to host this esteemed panel today. Investments in M&A is a fantastic topic for 6:30 p.m. on a Wednesday. So I hope to have as much fun as all of you will have. But that said, it is a critical junction for the chemical industry in India. And this is a really critical topic that doesn't get the space that it often needs. We've often spoke about, $2 trillion chemical industry, $3 trillion chemical industry in 2047, in 2050, in 2035. The timelines change, but we talk about the trillions coming in. One critical aspect of all of this is where does the money for this come from, right? We talk about capabilities, we talk about infrastructure, we talk about R&D and so on, but a critical aspect is also the money. To give a perspective, in 2024, about 80% of global chemical capacity added was in China. And 2022 to 24, roughly 50% of all global capex in chemicals industry was in China. If we have to fulfill the promise that India holds, if we want to become, let's say, the second largest chemicals producer in the world, if we want to become a $2 or a $3 trillion industry, no matter when, between 2035 and 2050, a critical part of the puzzle for us to solve is going to be capital, right? Where does investment come from, and what role can M&A play in the growth journey for India? And that's going to be the theme today. I think we have a panel that represents industry, it represents investment promotion, it represents the government, and it represents consultants like us. So there is a good mix of expert view in this panel. And what we will try to unpack today is, from the varying perspectives, how can India solve the capital puzzle and the investment puzzle over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? That's really the agenda. I think the format of this panel is going to be, we're going to have a question that we discuss one by one, and at the end, we will hope to have 10, 15 minutes of Q&A. On that note, I'll get started, Vishal, with you, right? Vishal, you worked abroad, you worked in India, the vantage point of looking at the chemicals industry from multiple lenses. You've also recently done multiple M&A deals in India. So when you look at from your experience, how do you assess India's attractiveness as an investment destination? And how do you assess the Indian environment for M&A?
Thanks, Vish. And if the panel is not a good enough reason, I guess the cocktails and dinner is a good reason to stay here, for the next 45, 50 minutes. I believe they've got good food for dinner. So Vish, on that point, see, for any investor, what is market attractiveness about? The first criteria is you got to have a large market to access. I think the biggest advantage that we have in India here, which is attractive for investors, is we have a pretty large domestic market. And this domestic market is growing. So I think we are all very fortunate that we are in this country compared to many other countries across the world. The growth rate of our end segments is pretty strong. It's double digits in some cases, it's high single in some, it's low single in some, but every segment is growing. There is no segment that's declining. And we can talk of chemicals as one word, but there's nothing like one chemical. There are thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds and thousands of chemicals, each one catering to different segments. So again, attractiveness will depend on which segment we are focused on, and what application that particular chemical or molecule is playing in that particular segment. So to me, that's the first and most important thing that's attractive to any investor. The size of the market, the fact that the market's growing and is going to continue to grow for the next 25, 30, 50 years. This is not a market that's at anywhere close to stagnation. It's just at the point of takeoff. That's where we are. Number two, just think of the basic factors of production. So let's think of land, let's think of labor, let's think of capital, let's think of technology. We are pretty cost effective in India on all factors of production. So even though Vish spoke about capital and investments coming in today's India, I don't think we have any lack of capital. Money is not the problem. If there's a problem, it is ideas. If there's a problem, it is risk-taking. And if there's one issue that we have, I think it's technology. Technology from two perspectives. One, what do we produce? What do we take to market? And is it going to be different? And second, from a technology perspective, Are we innovating well enough? Are we investing enough in R&D? Are we creating new things? Because if you're not going to do that, I think that 2 trillion, 3 trillion will remain a dream. We will remain a country or an industry that takes products from outside, copies it, creates a Me Too, and takes it to market. That's not going to be good enough. You know, history has proven, look at any industry, the businesses and the countries that eventually win and become the number 1, number 2, or number 3 are the ones that innovate. I think we have a problem there in India from an innovation standpoint. We are way behind, way behind. And that's one problem we need to solve. Think of land, think of power, think of labor. We have enough talent. That's not a problem. Land, power is pretty competitive compared to any other, most other countries in the world. So we are pretty good on that. So I think this is what investors will find attractive. I spoke of technology as a challenge and I spoke of innovation as a challenge. And since Vish, you specifically mentioned M&A, I think one phenomena that's happening in the industry which is going to make M&A a little bit tricky, and let's see what Mahesh has to say about it later. The chemical industry has been hyped a lot and talked about a lot, I think rightfully, because there is opportunity. And this industry can become multiples of its size. But because there's so much talk around it, that famous McKinsey report which said India is the future chemical hub of the world, everyone's read it. And I think what's happened from an M&A point of view is it has raised the expectations of everybody. And hence, it is getting increasingly difficult to do M&A. Now, we talk of M&A, all of us. I think all of us understand what M&A is. But let me also clarify here. There is good M&A and there is not good M&A. Not every M&A works. Half of them don't. In fact, a majority of them actually don't achieve the results that were intended. The good ones really work well for both the buyer and the seller, and for the people involved in those organizations. And that's the kind of M&As we need to try and do. So M&A is good. It's a good thing to do. It creates scale, it creates synergy, it creates more power, it makes that particular company which is doing the good M&A to really build something for the future. But if the expectations on the sell side are sky high because there's so much buzz around and so much hype around, it becomes very difficult to do it. The value creation is not there anymore. The buyer will not find an ROI. I see that singularly as the number 1 challenge today in India. Second are regulatory hurdles, approvals for every single thing from a land transfer to a license transfer, particularly if it's a hazardous goods license or it's a narcotics bureau license. These things are very painstaking in any M&A to execute. So that generally delays the execution, doesn't disturb the M&A, but delays the execution. I think that's how I would respond to your question, Vish.
Great. Thanks a lot, Vishal. So ideas, not capital, that is very powerful framing. And let's see if the rest of the panel agrees to that. There is a lot of capital still needed in my view. Second, red tape clearly needs to go away. Me Too is not good enough. Great themes. And I think well taken the point on M&A needs to have realistic expectations. And I think a lot of people will agree expectations have grown way beyond where the market is. Thanks. We'll move on to Sanjay. Sanjay, as a growing player in specialty chemicals, what are key enablers that you think will help you attract the right kind of capital, either strategic or financial, to accelerate your growth agenda?
I mean, as a growing company, I think whether it's a strategic investor coming in or financial investor coming in, both of the major values is the performance, the kind of credibility you have in the company, and going forward, what is the synergies you are looking at. I think from the strategical point for sure, what are the synergies of the new opportunities we are getting? That's one of the most important areas of the strategic partner being interested in you. Apart from that, there is obviously what kind of value worth we can bring for the investors in future, sustainable growth, what kind of R&Ds and other kind of product portfolios we can add on those lines. So these will always be something which the strategic investors are looking at. At the same time, the past performance, the track record, and the most important thing right now is I believe is the return on capital employed, which is something which is very important. especially after the fundraise. I mean, the kind of like Vishal just said about the market, the sell side expecting huge numbers now, looking at all the fancy things and all, and how do we bring that thing and deliver the results to the investors at large. So if I talk about our company, Fineotex, we also raised around 342 crores last year, almost $42 million. So it was done by an equity round only. I mean, there are, like he said, capital is available easily. However, what is more important is what kind of, how do we service the investors, and what will be the ROC going forward and ROIs. This is something which is really important to do about. I think the investors are looking at these factors at the most, and operating efficiencies, and what kind of business lines and synergic we are. So I think these are the factors which I think is playing a very important role to attract the right kind of investors. Yeah, something like this I would like to say.
Thanks, Sanjay. Maybe just a quick follow-up to both you and Vishal, since both of you mentioned this. One of the comments I've always heard from global customers buying from India is that Indian companies like to skim the profit pool, which is we prefer products which are 15-20% EBITDA or more, whereas when they go to other countries, China in particular, the Chinese investors are open to integrate backward even if at a lower EBITDA. Is the expectation from investors making us skim the market a lot more than just go backward?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the Indian investors are always expecting more returns compared to the global investors, for sure. There is no doubt about it. And this is also one of the situations we face on and off. And apart from the merger and acquisitions, I think looking at these kind of opportunities, I think a foreign acquisition is sometimes much lucrative from the company's perspective rather than Indian acquisitions. And as Vishal already mentioned that, it's how do we bring the, the businesses and ROC and ROEs also into that. It's something which is very important. And yeah, that's the way I would like to say.
It's a very, very important question you asked, Vish. Now, for any of you in the audience who were at the ICC conference, which happened a few months back, there was this gentleman called Shen Hong from McKinsey China. He leads McKinsey China. And he spoke about how has the Chinese chemical industry become to what it is today. And this is one of the points he mentioned. Profit expectations are very low. He also said only the top 10% of the players actually make any reasonable profits. The rest of them make very poor profits. The bottom 50% actually lose money. Now, how do they survive? They survive because they get support from the government. The Chinese government has been doing this for the last 25 years, which is why China has been able to scale the way they did. He also made a very important point where he said they build capacities way beyond the domestic market requirements. Because they put the capacities in place first, even though they know they'll lose money in the initial years, they will get taken care of by the government, and eventually they'll manage to reach a 50% capacity utilization and start making some small money. We don't have that safety net in India. Sorry. When we make an investment, okay, so if I go and put 5,000 crores tomorrow, and if that investment goes wrong, I've got shareholders to answer. The government's not going to give me 5 rupees. Unless there's a PLI scheme in place, and even then I'll need to achieve those targets, and those targets are not easy. Go and ask any company that has taken a PLI scheme. Those targets are pretty stiff and tough, right? So we don't have that safety net. We'll have to survive ourselves. If I take loans and put up a company and make an investment, and if I can't repay the loans tomorrow because my business was difficult and I went bankrupt, I don't have, Chapter 11 of the US to protect me. I will probably go to jail. And this is a challenge with many entrepreneurs face, and hence risk capital in India is very difficult to find. People are not prepared to take that risk because if your bet goes wrong, the cost is very expensive. You're probably destroyed as a professional or as an entrepreneur. Yeah? The President of the United States has declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy 3 times so far, and he's now the president, right? Multiple companies have gone bust. We can't do that in this country. So I think these are some reasons, fundamental reasons, Vish, where the US has a lot of risk capital. Going bankrupt and failing is not a bad thing there. It is a bad thing here, unfortunately. Our culture also is a bit like that, right from school. Second, we don't have the safety net that the Chinese government provides. We have to fend for ourselves. So hence, I think Our investors in India locally are more cautious. They are more careful while making investments. Hence, a lot of research goes in, studies go in, and you make the bet when you're reasonably sure that you'll be successful and you won't land up in a problem.
That is extremely insightful. Thanks to the both of you for illuminating this lot of structural issues. I'm going to switch the order a bit, given the point around the support needed. Maybe, Ms. Neha, if I can request you, to talk about some of the measures that the government and Invest India are taking. I don't think it's easy to fix all the issues that we have compared to our competitors globally, but some of the measures that the government and Invest India are taking to help the sector, that will be great.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here for this event today. I'm representing the government of India today, so while yes, there's a long way to go for our success, and there's a long way to go for India to achieve the target that we have set, there are a few pointers that I think we mostly forget when we are talking about reaching targets, when we are talking about capacity building, which is when we are competing with a country like China. Let us not forget it's an authoritarian country. It's not a democracy. So that's the first point. So when we talk about the benefits that the government have provided the companies, which is a very, very good step, and something we are also aspiring through the PLI schemes, through the PCPI zones, through the GST clarity, through electricity rates, labor reforms, etc. We are also aspiring for that, but there's a lot of stringency in terms of the amount of capital that can be dispersed, because at the end of the day we are answerable to our taxpayers. So there has to be a lot of credibility to the amount of capex that we can give out, because A, we are not an authoritarian country, but yet we are competing and trying to match those standards. So that is point one. Point two is India comes, this is kind of going backwards a little, but we come with a history of colonialism, which we have tried to first navigate through, and on the basis of that is what we are developing. So what I'm trying to say is that, yes, our pace could have been much faster, but let us not forget that our starting point was much lower than a lot of the other countries. So I think that is another point that has to be always kept in mind. Now, if we have to talk about the reforms that the government of India is doing, PCPIR zones, we have established 4 PCPIR zones, one in Dahej, Gujarat, with a capex size of upwards 1 lakh crores. Then Barmer, Rajasthan, then Kakinada and Visakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh, Paradeep in Odisha. And in both AP and Odisha, we are investing 40,000 crores capex plus. Incentives are being given to downstream chemical companies to come and invest in these ports. PCPIR zones have been recognized specifically to promote the chemical zones and create a hub and ecosystem in these areas. Then PLI scheme, while there's not a direct PLI scheme for the chemicals industry, but a lot of the supporting sister subsidiary industries in terms of your bulk drugs, APIs, then starting intermediary drug products, those have been given support. And that is creating a spillover into the chemicals industry in terms of pushing more investments into this sector. Our electricity rates, which have been recognized by many of us, are the lowest in the country at $0.07 per kilowatt hour. We have done massive labor reforms. This is, I think, a huge, huge work that the government of India is doing. We are reforming 29 labor laws and bringing it down to 29 codes and bringing it down to 4 codes. So that is bringing a lot of credibility, giving workers the right, and at the same time reforming the unorganized sector into an organized sector. Now, we have recognized 10 plastic parks all over the country with investment capping of 40 CR per project. So also promoting plastic parks, and 10 areas have been recognized across the country, and the list is out there for everybody to see. And in terms of GST, I think GST is probably one of the most remarkable changes also that the government has done. Reduced GST rate to 17% for the chemical sector, and that has reduced tax burden on the investors also. So that is another big reform that the government of India has done. And I think let us also talk about the soft skill promotion. There is the chemical subsidy promotion scheme where R&D and innovation in newer products in the chemical sector is being promoted, and grants are being given for that. research and development and hubs are being promoted in specific chemical zones. So a lot of soft skill development is being done. Then for the farmers, the urea chemical has been subsidized at 242 rupees for 45 kgs of urea. So that indirectly benefits a lot of the chemical companies who are in this area. I think I've listed down a couple of the incentives and the policy changes that we have done. Definitely there's more work going on with the India-UK FTA, especially in the organic chemicals. That has opened up door to more export in that area, and hopefully we should have lots of participants from this room as well as the entire chemicals sector coming in and participating in that. I think I would like to just pause there so we can soak in all the information. But yes, work is being done, and it's a non-stop process. The progress goes on, and we are on that path.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that perspective. Maybe I'll complement that perspective with a question to Mr. Ranjith. You are looking at this from the state lens. What Neha is trying to do from the national lens, you're looking at the state lens. And as one of our most progressive states in attracting investments, and given the already huge success in the pharma cluster and the emerging success in the Vizag cluster, what are investors asking from the states in India, and how is Andhra responding to it?
Hello? Yeah. First of all, let us accept the fact that it is really tough to do business in India. So it is open secret, and in a sector where it is globally competitive, and because the supply chains are interconnected and your input impetus, the cost of capital is higher in India, it's even tougher. And in a sector which is even more regulated because of the risks and the dangers of the chemicals and the regulations, it's the toughness level goes higher. So, but still you can see that multiple companies operating in the country and they're making good margin. So it's tough waters, but there are people who are suffering the tough waters. But we cannot say that not everybody could have to serve these tougher waters. And that's the role the governments need to do at the central level or the state level to ease against these global tailwinds, so that the industries can thrive and promote. So there's various schemes that, to address this issue, the government of India and the state level, the states are coming up with various schemes. So one thing would be the ease of doing business, giving the regulatory approvals, the single window portal, interlinking of the national single window and the state's single window portals, so that ease of clearances. And the second would be giving the more market access, promoting the MSMEs in terms of having them business level buyer-seller meetings. So there are a lot of activities that the state governments do, and they come with the policies. And the third part would be the states also, at the national level and the state level, also working on building the ecosystems like the pharma clusters or the petrochemical clusters, or even agro-processing clusters, so or the steel clusters. So there are various locations which are the electronic manufacturing clusters. So various locations which are organically developed in the country, and in some areas it was purely due to the government support in terms of land, incentives, low cost of power, or how these things are developed. And having said all these things, I am putting the incentive part at the last. So the states and the central government is also supporting in terms of incentives as part of their policy. So the central government in terms of PLI, or the state government in terms of GST reimbursements, or the fixed capital investment reimbursements, are trying to promote the industry and promote investments in the country. But having said that, there's a need for the way the industry needs to look at these investments also, because when we look at an investment, of course, you need capital to do the investment. It can be the promoter's money, or it can be the bank's money, or it can be your supplier's money. You make the delayed payments or get the money and you can recapitalize. And it can be your customer's money. So you just mark up a bit higher and you get more profits. And also the incentives from the government and the state. So if you look at these things, currently, if you look at all these things, the flow of incentives from the government is not as expected as the flow of money from the other markets. So even the businesses needs to take this into consideration while doing these investments. However, a lot of things has been implementation from the central and state governments, and pretty much to say how the investment are going to come for all these investments or the big plans of 2 trillion and all. I think it's going to be debt. It's going to be infused by the debt from the banks and from the people. And how it's going to be paid is going to be paid from the people's taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ranjith, for a very candid view of some of the challenges that we face and the opportunities in Andhra. Maybe I'll shift. I think we've got a good view of how companies have seen, India from, let's say, Vishal's point of view and Sanjay's point of view. We've also seen how government is trying to encourage investment. In the current scenario, maybe we'll move a bit to the future. So, Amita, you are looking at global supply chains actively. And the last 4 years, 5 years have been rapid change. We've spoken about China +1. I think every week there is a new tariff scenario. Last week there is Iran, Israel. Before that there is Russia, Ukraine. The world is changing, and India's role in the world is also changing every week. So in that context, what is our role in the future world that is evolving in the chemicals value chain? And what are barriers that can stop us from our full potential?
Thanks, Vish, for that question. So yes, every day the world is evolving. Spoken about China +1, but every quarter there's a different geopolitics scenario that emerges, right? As we look at it, we tend to speak to a lot of global chemical companies. And the amount of discussions and the seriousness on looking at India as an opportunity for the future has, increased multifold over the last 2 to 3 years, right? Earlier, if you were to meet any of the global chemical companies and talk about India, they would just maybe hear you for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then give it a pass. Now, there are global companies, leadership visiting India to understand India and looking at 2 kinds of opportunities. One, of course, India is a large domestic market. Vishal spoke about it. It's the only large growing market. So how do they serve India? But also looking at India as a place to serve some of the global countries, right? And as they do that, why are the discussions happening now? I think it's a confluence of 3 factors. It's one, of course, the domestic growth, safety net of having a large domestic demand. The second one is when they are seeing a lot of Indian companies which are sizable, which they can look at to and partner if they were to do business in India. And I think the third is a lot of government support or push, I would say, and Neha spoke a lot about what Invest India is trying to do. So as we do these conversations, which to your point, what are the kind of barriers in their mind, or what are still the questions, right? And why these investments are probably taking longer than what we would have imagined. I think the first and foremost is, yes, it is not easy to do business in India, right? We've been talking about ease of doing business, the reforms around environmental clearance, so on and so forth. But if you look at it from a global lens, India is still considered to be one of the difficult countries to operate in. And hence, they are looking at partnerships where they can actually work with some of the Indian promoters to make that happen, right? I think the second one, as we see it, are the questions around infrastructure, right? So there is a lot of, I would say, happening around the parks, the PCPI that are getting set up, right? But, what around logistics? How will that play out? Those are the kind of questions that, as we see the global companies still having that in their mind, if they compare India to some of the other, economies. I think the third one is around, do Indians or Indian companies have the capability to invest in R&D, right? If they actually look at the kind of R&D spend that the Indian companies are doing, maybe it's in the range of 1.5% of the revenue. And if you compare that to some of the global spends, it's upwards of 5 to 6% of revenue, right? So there is a question in their mind around, if the companies that I'm going to invest in or partner in, will they have the capability to invest in technology, innovation, not just from a new product or new chemistry, but also, let's say process innovation, right? And where is the skill going to come from? So I think, like I said, there's immense opportunity. There's a lot of positive discussion happening. The China plus one is, people are planning to shift shares. Some shares are already, shifting out of China. But I think the questions in their mind still continue to be, how do I operate? What's the infrastructure? And, what's the kind of innovation and technology that I'm going to see in India?
Great. Thanks a lot for that comprehensive view, Amita. That really takes us, again, the changing role in global value chains. Maybe I'll request Eva to talk a bit about what common ground you see between the Indian and Flemish chemical ecosystems. In a lot of way, what the Flemish chemical ecosystem has achieved is a good role model for India to aspire to get to the future that Amita spoke about, right? And what can government platforms like yours really do to bridge the two ecosystems in a more proactive fashion?
All right, well, thank you very much for this question and also for including me in the panel. Maybe for those of you who are not yet familiar with Flanders, what Flanders exactly is. Flanders is the northern region of Belgium, so Belgium in the center of Europe, and then within Belgium, the northern part, that's Flanders, which I represent here this evening. So I think Flanders and India, we have a lot of things in common, far more than we might expect, because on one hand we have India, which is huge, and then Flanders is just a small region in a small country in Europe. I would say, first of all, we have a very much well-established and innovation-driven chemical sector, both present in India and in Flanders. In India, you have the big names such as Reliance, such as UPL, Fineotex, we have Godrej, also here present in the panel. And at the same time, in Flanders, we have organizations, whether it's an Essentia or it's a Catalysti. Catalysti is a spearhead cluster working on chemicals and plastics. We have Bluechem. Bluechem is the first incubator in Europe for sustainable chemistry. Needless to say that all these organizations, they work together with big corporations, universities, corporations such as BASF, for instance, or Borealis. They work together with government agencies, they work together with organizations and universities and so on. All together, of course, trying to face challenges such as climate change and the scarcity of resources. So aside from that, it's also quite remarkable to see that Flanders, we operate as a gateway. We as a gateway to Europe, whereas India serves as a gateway to East Asia and to South Asia. So these are the things that we have in common, and of course, we all face the similar challenges, and we're all working on climate tech. We're all working on a more sustainable way, a more sustainable future for our people. But I think more interesting is not only to see what points we have in common, but also to see where we can complement each other, where we can, do some matchmaking. So what we have to offer, how does that match what you're looking for, and vice versa. And I think that's where it becomes interesting, because of course, Flanders, we offer access to the European market. We have a very strong logistical infrastructure in place. And at the same time, we also have many opportunities for research and development. And that, I believe, very beautifully matches the scale of India, the Indian market. At the same time, the demand in India is growing. And of course, at the same time, you also are very cost competitive. That is something which is interesting for us coming from Flanders. In other words, for Indian companies, I would say if you're looking for innovation, you're looking for R&D partnerships, then Flanders is definitely something that you want to consider, whether you want to work on advanced materials, on green chemistry, for instance. These are all fields where we are strongly doing research and development in. If you want to access your European market, you can take a look at the infrastructure that we're boasting in Flanders. In other words, you can use Flanders as your launchpad to the European market. And if you want to consider any kind of technology transfer, then we can definitely help you to get in touch with the right partner in Flanders if you want to look into sustainability, circular economy, and so on. From a Flemish perspective, of course, India is a tremendously interesting market. We can consider doing manufacturing here, and of course, there's a lot of availability of highly skilled talents here in India that we also would love to tap into. Now, how do we, as Flanders Investment and Trade, how do we enter into the picture? First of all, I would like to explain that we're not a consulting firm, we're a government agency, and what we want to do is boost the trade relations between India and Flanders. Meaning that when you talk to us, it's confidential and it's one-to-one. And we don't charge. Note that down as well. So yes, you can see us as a government agency that connects the dots. We like to bring people together, companies together, and also ecosystems. So we connect ecosystems, in this case, the chemical ecosystem. We can link you with partner organizations, federations, government officials we talk to, obviously. But we also do B2B matching and so on. So you can see us as your partner. We offer customized, tailored services. So we like to see, first of all, who you are. We would like to understand your point of view and then see if there's a possible match with somebody or a company on the Flemish side. We can offer you advice, and we like to take our customers on a journey from the A to Z. It's not just like, okay, we can give you a piece of information and that's it, off you go. No, we are there all the way, whether you're a Flemish company or an Indian company. We're more than happy to assist and to see what is your specific need, what are you looking for, and how we can find a suitable partner for you in Flanders. At the same time, you can also consider us as a platform, because just like here, we like to put Flanders on the radar. We would like to do matchmaking, and in order to do so, we have, just like here, we have a simple booth present where you can talk to my team. 2 ladies here also sitting in the audience as part of my team. So we go on roadshows, we talk to people on all different levels, and we like to see where are the opportunities for Indian companies, for Flemish companies, and then we try to connect the dots. At the same time, we have not only present here in Mumbai, so myself, I'm based with my team in Mumbai. We also have an office in New Delhi and in Bangalore, but we have more than 70 offices worldwide. In other words, we are close to our markets, we're close to our customers, and we believe that is also our strength, because we see opportunities, we know what is the potential out there. We're familiar with the situation in Flanders, and so that's how we act as a connecting factor. And hopefully, of course, we can also help you, your company, to see what is your opportunity in Flanders and how we can help you to reach your clients, not only in Flanders, not only in Belgium, but also in Europe.
Thanks a lot for that view, Eva, and hopefully the FTA helps us get through faster for collaboration as well when the EU FTA happens. That brings me last to Mahesh. Mahesh, I think a lot of diverse perspectives from this panel. Large domestic market, really strong potential globally in the global value chains as our role changes. As always, complex operating conditions. Significant capital for significant competition for capital. Even in this panel, we have Flanders and India and Andhra competing for capital. Very high profit expectations, even higher valuations. What does this mean for capital flows? What is the outlook for M&A and fundraise in India in the chemical sector?
Okay, let me take it a little differently. First of all, I think most of our audience here come from a background of chemicals or associated with the chemical industry. So there is a saying that without a good chemistry with your counterpart or a better half, you can't grow your family. The same manner, without having a strong chemical industry, a country or the economy cannot grow. So chemistry and chemistry, personal and economies, both has to go in tandem. Now, I just pick few lines from my fellow panelist, which comes one way or the other way. First, India is a difficult market. Second, it is difficult to do business. Third, capital is abundantly available, take as much, but Sanjay rightly said you have to generate return of the capital. Then the other aspect come, which is very important for us as Singhi advisors to assess. Then when Vishal says that the 50% M&A fails, right? Minimum. So let me take one by one. First, the last part, the M&A fails. In fact, Vishal, it is not 50% M&A fail, it's a 70 to 80% M&A fail. Yeah, it'd be nice, right? However, the other factual correct information is that 90% of the business when they start, they fail. So on the relative position, when you start a business, 90% or 95% fails, they do not see the light of the day after 5 to 10 years time, they vanish. As compared, 70% fail, that means on the relative position, M&A succeed 200% times more than starting a business. So there's a perspective. To counter that, the same philosophy that when we say that there is a pass ratio of 0.02% for IAS, 1.2% for CA, or for any good MBA college learner, the ratio could be 1% to 3%, right? That means 97 to 99% fail. Still, people go for that. It's not a question of how many fails. It's a question of those who succeed, to what extent they succeed. If that is not clear, just look at a company like a Vedanta Group, where not one, except one factory, every single factory has been, business be acquired by them, and they generate 60,000 crore of EBITDA. Or the world's largest steel company, ArcelorMittal, they have not set up a single factory, they still are the largest in the world. So it's a question of how well you integrate your plans of growth, accelerating the growth through M&A and advancement of the cycle ahead of others. That is a single line. Now, coming to a point, why do M&A are taken place? Now, M&A is not just like, okay, I just like I have money bag full and go and acquire a business. No, it doesn't work. If it works that way, then it's bound to fail. Then it's 100% going to fail. So look at a business perspective that why should M&A should be pursued for a growth strategy. What is M&A? Acquiring a business in advancement of if others are available, I should take it. But more importantly, unless your business strategy about what you are doing, what are your strength area and what are your gap area. If the gap and strengths are not understood, going out in the market and taking something will never going to work. That means it is lot to do with what you do yourself. Unless your internal assessment of your business ability, your management, your risk carrying capacity, your earning capacity, your potential, if that is not understood, if it is not measured, then you cannot have a right to measure other capacity or others valuation, because if you are not going to integrate it, it is bound to fail. So just assume why would M&A will be pursued. Sometimes you acquire businesses to get access to matured market or an unaddressable market. That is access for the market, you acquire a business. At times you acquire a business to enhance your capacity. At times you acquire a business to supplement your capabilities, like a forward, lateral, backward, whichever way, because you can buy resources, you can buy a market, you can buy capability. At times you also acquire business to get a capabilities and the management together, like a Rhodia acquired by Solvay, where the Rhodia's management was running Solvay. It's a capabilities and the management acquisition, reverse of a capabilities. At times you also acquire business to eliminate your competitor. Thumbs Up acquired by Coca-Cola. The Thumbs Up was to eliminate, to gain a market so that there is no competition. That is a monopolistic position. Nothing is wrong. if you are very clear that why I am going to acquire a business, and if you are able to implement that correctly, then it's absolutely okay. That is a question of how well your plans of strategy and the business are integrated. Now, it is not necessary that you acquire a business 100%. At times you end up forming a joint venture, you sell 26%, you can sell 51%, you can just form a new business of product alignment or distribution arrangement. To us, everything is M&A because it's a business alignment of creating a value which is higher than doing it alone. If not, then just connecting two companies, 100 crore profit here, 100 crore profit here, doesn't make 200 crore profit. It can become zero also, it can become 400 crore also. Now, coming to the other point of discussion, that India is a risk or is a difficult business. No, business is always a risk. Whether you do in China, whether you do in India, or anywhere Timbuktu, where the business itself is a risk, but then you have to measure your risk. If it is easy, then everyone do the same thing, then become commoditized. If it is too difficult, many players will not enter, then you create a monopolistic position. So delta is in between somewhere. If it is difficult, doesn't mean the people will not come and do business here. Now, if it is difficult, it creates a high barrier of entry. That's the reason India being difficult, it also creates a high valuation because those who succeed here, they succeed pretty well. And those who succeed they pretty well, they create a barrier around them so that the valuations are multiple of our profits. If the world markets works on say 8% EBITDA, India will work on 20 to 30% EBITDA, or a public market or M&A market 10 to 15% EBITDA. So that's a measurable value of a barrier. Then the last point we said that we always keep saying that, oh, we are in a China plus strategy or a Europe plus one strategy or anything, whatever it is. My 1 point line here is, let us not get into a business because others are weak. You should be in a business as long as you are stronger. If you are strong, by default others become weak. There's a famous dialogue of a Diwar picture where Amita Bachchan said, "हम जहाँ खड़े होते हैं लाइन वैसे चालू होती है." So let us be in Indian and understand that if we are there and if we have some inherent strength of our own, depending on a constantly measurable permanent advantage if we carry, then you will always be ahead. And if you are not strong in the home market, you cannot be strong in the overseas market. Now, why do I say so? The measurable strength of your business. So, every business person, every geography, every such within India country, every state has a different strength. So, if you cannot measure your constantly advantage position over other, then you will always be behind others. So try to measure what are the strengths, sometimes resources, suppose you are into marine chemical and if you are close to the port, like Archeon or a Solaris, any companies, you are bound to win because your starting point is an advantage over others. If you are into mineral chemistries, if you are not at the source of paid mineral, you will not advantage. You are into green chemistries, if your source is not close to the organic chain or the plant site, you will not succeed. Each situation you have to measure what is one advantage which is constantly available to you over others. If that advantage is nurtured or harmonized into a situation of adding more advantage, you will be ahead of others and the world market become available to you. Like a MRF Madras rubber could not have been succeeded if the rubber advantage would not have been available. Or a parachute, which is a Mariwala family, without the coconut chain in the Kerala market, if that was not available, company could not have been created. So the starting point has to be advantage over others. Now coming to my area of subject, that why M&A should be pursued, why it succeed or it doesn't succeed. So the key thing is every business, if your input is measurable, your output has to be higher than the input. If you borrow at 9%, if your return is less than 13%, you are going to lose. If your output is higher return, then your input is never a cost. Same way, if you acquire some business, the incremental ability to add to your business, if your returns can be enhanced through your advancement of a cycle, then whatever cost you pay, it cannot be bad because you have measured your risk and you have measured your reward also. So it is important to first know the intended purpose. If you are buying a business because it is available, then I think that business is available to everyone. I would always suggest that buy something what you want rather than buy something what is available. Available is to everyone. Buy is a hunting. You hunt it only when you want it. You are just not go hunt and keep in your refrigerator or something and they say, oh, I'll use it sometime else. No. You hunt it, you buy it only when you need it. So it's important that what exactly are the gap in your business, find it, measure it, find your competitive position and then pick something in the structure which fits well with you. Then whether it's a European market or an American market or a Chinese market, it doesn't matter. When we say China versus India, fine, they have their own advantage, they have monopoly position, they have government control, they can spend millions and billions of capital to create a market size of monopolistic. We are not in that market. So let us not be worried what they do. If they are good into continuous process, let us be on a batch process. If they are into something which they did a big scale, okay, do it at a lab scale, do it at a sub scale, but be competitive. Because at the end of it, your raw material, which is input, added by your skill, which is your people and the cost, if that is measurably high, it will work. In a simplistic manner, any business can be measured by your raw material to finished goods delta available. You can be at the delta of a 20% validation, 30%, 40%, 50% is top. Because more than 50% you are an innovator or something. If that delta between 20% material margin to 50% margin, 4 categories, commodity, some formulation, especially a super specialty or a CDMO, if that is added by capex cost and return is measured, then I think you have to create a basket that this is my area of basket and in which I'll excel. And that category at India has a natural advantage for 2 count. One is any comparable market, including in China, our cost of capex, of course minus the land value, is at least 20 to 40% lower than any of the comparable market. That is cost of capex. Kiloliter capacity of whatever ton capacity you say, the capital cost of setting up a factory minus the value of land is at least 20% to 40% lower than any of the global market. That is a natural advantage of setting a factory here. Second, this cost of OPEX. There is a people cost or the organizational cost. That itself is, I'll not compare to Europe market, but most of the developed market, our OPEX cost is 30 to 50% lower. So when you have an advantage of a CAPEX and OPEX together, we know that we are naturally competitive. So the business will not be spoiled because of a competitiveness. It will be spoiled only because of a management ability. And that is where if the management is focused to measure the strength and weakness, whatever you do, whether you acquire a business or set up a factory, you are not going to fail. And if your input is correct, output cannot be bad. I hope it's a little different than what you would have expected me to say, more business driven, but that's how the M&As should be perceived it.
Thank you. I think, Mahesh, that was a great M&A primer for all the chemical engineers in the room. Thank you for that educative input. So,
I'm an engineer, not a finance guy, so my language will also be different.
Great. I think we are at 7:30 and I have 2 minutes between this panel and the cocktails, so I'll summarize quickly. Phenomenal discussion. I think one common conclusion, the India opportunity is real. Vishal spoke about the 50-year domestic market opportunity of uninterrupted growth. Amita spoke about the world being ready for India, whether it's China plus one or global companies coming to India. So the demand is real, the opportunity is real. What is not certain is whether we are ready for it. I think we had government representatives talk about the constraints they are working under, right? I think Ranjith spoke about India not being ready. Neha spoke about how working in a chaotic democracy has its own challenges, the constraints that we face in, and how the government is trying to create the infrastructure amidst the constraints we have. And we also spoke about how Indian companies might need to evolve. Maybe we are too profitable. I didn't expect that insight. I didn't think that would be a stark insight, that we are too profitable to be competitive globally. It's hard to compete with the competitor who's at 8% EBITDA when we are at 20% EBITDA. That is something to think about. Maybe we are too valuable. That is also a surprising insight. I think the fact that our valuations are probably ahead of what our profitability and growth is, that is something to think about. There is a lot of food to chew. The government has its act cut. There is private companies have their act cut out. There is infrastructure that is needed. And we are in an era where we need to collaborate with other ecosystems and also compete with other ecosystems which are also seeking the capital for their own growth. And that puts us in a very interesting place where the opportunity is ours to take, but whether we do capitalize on it is really up to all of us in this room, whether we are in the government role or a private role or in consulting investment roles like us, right? But thank you all. Thank you for the time. Should we do Q&A, Praveen, or should we? Whoever has questions is between us and the cocktail. So on that note, we'll take a couple of questions.
Hello. My question is to Mahesh. Why the traditional value-added technology companies are still valued at EBITDA multiples, and why the B2C companies are loss-making are still valued at different multiples? Why an M&A firm like you are not able to get value for technology companies?
If you see my WhatsApp message, it says, "Dil mange more," right? What does it mean? Every business person wants more and more. Just because some other company XYZ, without naming, or maybe a safest name is to use the name of Baizu, right? Because now it's a known story. Just because someone is valued at XYZ, high value, doesn't make them important that their value are so much. It is a created value or it's a given value for the investment. My last round is seen to be issues. That doesn't mean they convert into cash today. When you say M&A or when you say investment, they're two different worlds. When you invest in the company, you invest for the future at a given valuation in hope and anticipation that my money will grow the business to XYZ. And in that hope, small risk distributed among others, someone takes a charge and they grow value. That valuation cannot be comparable to valuation in M&A, because when you acquire a business, you are acquiring on your risk and your ability. That means you have to measure how much return I can generate from this. Just because, suppose some company is running at 35 or 50 times EBITDA multiple, that does not mean that they will acquire a business at that multiple. If the delta is not there, they will not acquire. If Fineotex has been running, say, 30 times EBITDA multiple, if you go to them to acquire a business, they will find it difficult to justify any equation below 8 to 9 times or 10 times at most and stop, right? So because it's not risk, it's a valuation to justify to convert business into cash. Now you said second point that the tech companies or any XYZ companies are valued more. It's a relative word. Any valuation which is backed by hope of future, supported by funds or the VC fund or whatever company where they're working on others' money, that valuation is not valuation, it's a valuation changing game, which is a hard fact. We are all mostly manufacturers here, but valuation changing game is different and valuation building game is separate. If you are valuable, someone will come and certainly give value rightfully at which level they can make money. Then the second question is a cusp of the problem where everyone can say, oh, how much is a good valuation, how much is bad. If you are valuable only as long as others who come makes more money than you or create more value than you. If they are able to do this and if they are going to pay a price to that, that's a correct price. Yes, you can have a 2 option, 3 option. If between comparable options you do not get a good valuation, that means either your expectations are incorrect or the timing is not correct. Then the only question comes, build your holding capacity. If you hold it tight, you will get a valuable. There was a time when a retail business, the largest player, the oldest Future Group, did not get 6,000 crore capital and they get FUT. At the same time, in the same month, DMart, which was a later entry in the company, they just sold 5% stake in the market and got 6,000 crore in the pocket. And the market value was 30 times more, which is 2 lakh crore rupees. Same business, same model is not a question of how good you are. How can you build your holding capacity when others come and attack because it's safe capital? Like a gold. Gold is safe, okay, it's valuable. If others are not safe, it's not valuable. So build your holding capacity. Long answer, but I hope, Mehtaji, this answer will be not only to you, but for almost everyone here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. On that note, given no other questions, thank you, everyone. Thank you to my fellow panelists for a very insightful and rich and sometimes really detailed discussion. Thank you for that. I look forward to connecting with all of you over drinks and dinner. Thank you.